Good morning. My name is Marcia Stromgren, and you've tuned in to Just the Facts. I have in the studio today Loren Martell. He's been a watchdog of the 709 school district since way back, and I want to welcome you, Loren, for coming in today.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Loren has a lot to say about the upcoming referendum that you will be facing on May 14th. I think it's important for you to hear the information that Loren has gathered over a period of time because it's going to affect you and your tax dollars once again. So Loren, let's get started.
Oh, you want me to just jump right in? Okay. I would say there's, like four very salient points in regard to this, and I'll just kind of lay them out, and then we can get into them in depth if you want to go that way a little bit. And the first one, of course, is just the level of the tax levy, and everyone should be aware of it, that, according to their Truth in Taxation presentation last December, their projected tax levy for 2024 is 46.3 million. So if you add another 5.29 million to that, that would bring it up to 51.6 million. An enormous amount of money per year. And if you look at the tax levy history, just 2 decades ago in 2003, it was 8 million. So more than a six-fold increase. And so, of course, the public has a right to ask a few questions and have a couple of concerns about how high it's gone and exactly what we've gotten for that money. So that's the first point. The second point I would like to bring up is that a lot of people don't realize yet, it wasn't really reported locally, but it's a very important point, and that is that they can renew that levy. They have the authority to do that now. The state legislature gave them that last year.
And that is without the voter approval.
Without voter approval, yes. So if they take it for 10 years, then that would be 52.9 million. They can renew it in 10 years for another 52.9 million. So that would be 105.8 million over 20 years. So I would stress to people, if you have some concern about that, or you should at least be concerned enough to show up at the polls on May 14th. If you want to vote for it, fine, but you should realize exactly what the tax liability is here, and that you may not have another say for 20 years on over $100 million if you don't vote on it. And the other point, of course, is that they even gave it to them on existing levies, and they have right now a $5 million a year 10-year levy in place that expires in 2028, and they can renew that as well. And I do believe they will do that in 4 years, renew that one for another 50 million. So there's a lot of money at play here. I think there's all kinds of other issues in terms of the money, the tax liability around maintenance, et cetera. We've got a lot of buildings here that are going to need maintenance shortly. They made them all new or like new in a little span of time without any maintenance plan, and they don't really have a good plan in place for that other than going to the taxpayers in the near future. And the former facilities manager did warn them, it's been 6 years, that we had a 5 to 10 year grace period, and then we were going to get hit with a huge number. Multiple buildings are going to need roofs at the same time. So there's just so much tax liability here that the public should really think about it. I believe that anybody has a right to think about and question the tax liability.
Well, first of all, they need to know about it before they can think about it.
Right, and again, and if I can just take one step back, I get accused of, just being anti-district, that sort of thing. It's a bunch of nonsense. I used to be a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. I supported every referendum. I even supported all 3 tiers of the referendum in 11 during the heart of the red plan, because we had just lost 70 teachers that year. We lost 45 the year before. I mean, it was falling apart from the foolish decisions that they had made. And I was concerned about public education. I think anybody should be concerned about education in general. It is our future. They play the kid card all the time, though, and they try to use that to make you not think about anything else, And I do think that the taxpayers should be brought into this conversation as well. At the last presentation that they held on the referendum last fall, and I went to all 3 of them, I'm the only one that did. And the other 2 people that showed up there, Francis Wittenberg and Richard Paulson, were gone, I was still talking to the chair and the superintendent for a while, and they both said, we're doing it for the children. We're doing this for the children. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll give you that. Of course you're concerned about the children, but who's looking out for the taxpayers? I just don't think anybody really is in this, and obviously, they should have a voice at the table as well. So it's very important to consider that. And at those presentations, John Magus admitted to the public that they didn't deliver on their promise the last time they got the $5 million a year for 10 years. They failed to reduce class sizes. That's how they sold it to the public back then. And he was explaining to the public that they failed to deliver. And in fact, he had his explanation a little wrong. He was actually referring to something that had happened in 2012 when he was talking about 2017. And I told him, what happened in 2017 was the healthcare reimbursement arrangement blew up on them by over $1 million all of a sudden. They had to cut $1.5 million mid-year in December of 17, middle of fiscal year 18. And I pointed out to him, that that's really the reason that they broke the promise is that the teacher contracts, the employee contracts were excessive to what they could afford at that moment, the way the budget was, and they knew that when they actually signed those contracts. I get those closed sessions recordings after the contracts are signed. That becomes public information. I'm the only one that puts in the information requests and listens to what went on behind closed doors. And I actually gave that to John when he came to town, the thumb drive, and I said, you should listen to this because I think you're still in the same pattern where you're signing contracts you can't afford, and that's one of the reasons you don't follow up on your promises, and money gets diverted over here, instead. And I told the News Tribune during the last election that that's effectively a bait and switch on the public. You're saying you're going to do all this, and then you're signing contracts, and that's where it's going to go. And I said, you're in the same position. That healthcare reimbursement arrangement is going to blow up again. The contract language is still the same, and still is now, 6 years later, where if it blows up again, 95% comes out of the district's budget, and the union's on a hook for 5%. I don't think that's a contract that should stay in effect. And there's a lot of other things about the contracts. At the Denfeld presentation, the chair of the board, Jill Lofald, let it slip that they're giving the teachers a 3% raise. She just came out and said, named that as one of the reasons why they needed more money. And John Magus said, well, that's still a negotiation, but she let it slip. And I think that they're likely to at least give a 3% raise. And I had the figure with me when I was talking to John, and I said, last time they gave a 3% raise in 15, that was $4.2 million across all the bargaining units. We're nearly a decade out. That's going to be about $5 million now, and employee benefits in the previous 4 years had been going up by over, around $2 million a year. And I said, we're in the same pattern, aren't we? You're going to have all these increased expenses. The revenue is significant from the state this time. They gave them a 4% increase on the per pupil formula, and that brought in $2.7 million. But that's still, the revenue is still well below what their expenses are likely to be. So aren't we in the same danger where you're going to give you're making a promise on a big investment here, but likely that a lot of money is going to get drained off again, and you're not going to deliver on the promise? And he said, I hope not. But I'm not. My hope is too strong on that. I think that there's good reason, given the track record of the place and all the broken promises that have been made on savings from the red plan, and they're going to use the money from the sale of Central to pay down the tax burden. They just kept that money. They've broken so many promises over the past several years. And by his own admission, they broke their promise on the last $5 million a year, 10 years. They didn't deliver on smaller class sizes. So there's good reason to question whether or not the promises will be kept. And my final point is, who's going to really oversee this? Who is going to oversee it for 10 years? I mean, there's a lot of stuff here. I don't know if you've seen the the plan, but it is quite extensive, 10-year plan. And who's going to really watch this for 10 years? I mean, one of the problems always is in government is the continuity of management. Is John Magus going to be here 10 years from now? I mean, the chair of the board is in her second term, the vice chair is in her third term. Not that the board's been very good at keeping track anyway, but who's going to really make sure that all of this is delivered in the percentages that they claim for the next 10 years? I personally doubt that that's going to be followed through on very effectively over 10 years, and there's good reason to wonder about that, just how well this promise will be kept. And finally, it's a money pit. That's the other thing I hear from people. It's a lot of money in technology. We've thrown a lot of money into technology over the years. I mean, the red plan, my God, but we threw into the technology in the red plan. And part of it is smart boards again. Well, when we get into a little bit more conversation, I'll lay out what happened with the red plan and their smart board investment. Again, it was a failed promise. It went south on them. That investment went south. There's been a lot of investments that have gone south, and I am concerned about promises being kept, proper oversight over it, whether or not what we give them is really going to be delivered on, and that promise is going to be kept. I really have deep concerns about it. I have a lot of concerns not only about this district, but in public education in general, and the kind of money we've been throwing at it, and the kind of returns we're getting for that money. I just, at times, I wonder if it's even sustainable. But when you see a levy go up over sixfold in 2 decades locally, and then you look at what we've really delivered on education, I think there's good reason to at least question some of it. Really, I do. I think a bigger conversation should be had here than we're having. It's just a big spin factory over there right now. They're spinning and spinning and spinning, and all the board members are, repeating the spin. But I think we should have a real conversation at some point, especially when you get a levy this high.
Well, there's many questions that have come up since you
Yeah,
started.
I'm sorry. Yep.
No, that's fine. So, just to clarify for people who may be not paying attention because they don't have their children in school, who is Joe Lufdahl? Who is she, and who is McManus? Is that the name of the fellow that you're talking about? Is that your superintendent, Ron?
His name is John Magus, yeah.
Magus is
Yep.
the superintendent
He's
of
the
schools.
superintendent, and Jill Lofall is the chair of the board.
Joe
Yep.
Lufdahl.
Yep.
Okay. And I think another problem, now are you going to these school board meetings on a regular basis?
I never
Or are you watching
go to them. I watch a lot on YouTube now. I
Okay.
I never go to the meetings in person, hardly ever.
Yeah, okay. At one time, you were there all the time taking notes,
Yeah.
because I know I was filming at the same time.
Yeah.
So people can watch these on the YouTube channel, and
Yeah.
why don't you give the name of the YouTube channel so we can direct people to
Oh, you
watch?
if you just go to ISD 709 board meetings, it comes up,
Okay.
It really isn't too hard to find them.
And they put them up there real quickly after the meetings are over with?
Relatively quickly, yeah.
Well, I know when I was monitoring Loren, they were not recording those. And I recorded for about 11 and a quarter years. They finally, towards the end of that, started recording so that people could, if they take the time to go look at them.
Yeah.
It seems to me that anyone that has children in the school, especially, should be watching them, taking the time to see what's really going on. And now this new superintendent, he's basically lockstepping what went on prior to him coming here, right?
Well, I had hope when he first came to town. I truly did. When he first got here, he reached out to me within a few days of coming here. I appreciated that. Brought me down there. We had a long discussion right out of the gate, and I thought, well, here's somebody that might listen to another point of view. But I lost a lot of faith, frankly, to be honest with you. I still like the guy personally, but I've lost a lot of faith in him, the way he handled those referendums last fall. In fact, we kind of locked horns a bit at the ALC presentation, and I asked him, I said, John, you really feel that you are fully informing everyone? That's what he kept saying. I just want to fully inform everyone. I said, you really think you're fully informing everyone, especially on this bond referendum? I said, people don't know what this is out there. I've been to many, many doors. They don't know what it is. They're not fully informed. And he said, I'm not lying. And I said, of course you're not lying. You're not, you are refinancing. You are, freeing up 2.6 million. But I said, I don't think it's presenting an accurate description at all to the public exactly what that burden is, the claim of $1 and everything. You can tweak things, you can say things in a way that are not really a lie, but it's not really informing the public. It's creating a misimpression, and there was a lot of that went on, and I think there's still a lot that goes on, and I guess that's always been my objection. I remember years ago, I cornered Bill Gronseth in Old Central. We got into the discussion, and I said, Bill, just tell the public the truth, Tell them that you made some mistakes. Admit it, tell them the truth, and I'll stand by you if you do that, and I would have, even though I would have taken a lot of heat for doing it. But I do think that in the long run, it's counterproductive to tell the public a story, and they use that word all the time now, story, our story. They say that all the time in the boardroom. I just don't think that telling the public a story is the right way to go. I think you're better off telling them the truth. And that's what I was hoping that I would get from John. I think we would have gotten that better, and no offense to John intended, but I did back his competitor for the role. He lost 4-3 to John. His name was Mike Funk. He was from Albert Lee. He's a superintendent over there, won Superintendent of the Year award 2 years ago for his work over there. I just think that he was willing to put things on the table. In fact, he said, during his interview, that it was time to go back to the future, and start looking at what we had done, seeing what we can do to correct it. He wanted to go back to Central and take a new look at STC up there. He said it's a wonderful facility. It's sitting there empty. It's been empty all these years. Let's take a new look at it all. He wanted to do that, and I thought it was time to do that. And unfortunately, Gronseth set all this up, and John came in here, in John's defense, it was the pandemic hit. There was a lot of stuff hitting him, and this thing was on the tracks. Gronseth had got it on the tracks. The DFL had gotten it on the tracks down in the Capitol and everything, and he just ran with it. And from then on, he's been just stuck in that rut that Bill kind of set up. And I do think at the end of the day, it's not a good way to govern, because you alienate so many people by doing that. Man, the people in this town, they are very forgiving if you were to play it straight. I think it would have been a better way to go. The same thing with the way they handled that extension to the red plan, building those new buildings up on the Central property and Xing out the 2 clauses that had anything to do with an election. They literally erased them out of the statute, so the public had no say. I'm the only one that showed up for the public hearing. I think that, governing that way, when I'm out there, and people, to this day, a lot of people don't even know they built those 2 new buildings yet, up there. It's just amazing to me, I don't think that's a good way to govern.
Let's stop right there and tell them what they built up there.
Well, they built, 2 new buildings, an administration building and a bus barn, a big heated bus barn for their bus fleet, and a service stall in there. It was a $31.5 million project, and the interest on that, they just issued that bond, 2024A bond, $6 million of interest on that bond. So we're looking at almost $40 million totally, if I'm correct. Let me see maybe it was 32.5 million. It's up there nearly $40 million anyway, with interest, 39.5 with interest. I must have missed something in the way I calculated that. But, that's 6 million, nope, that is actually the 2021 C bond. That's what's wrong. Okay, yeah, it's the 21 2021 C bond is the one for up there. The 2024 A bond is for the bond referendum they just passed, and that's $6 million. But on that one, there's $8 million of interest. The $31.5 million bond, and the total is $39.5 million. And they deferred those payments out to 2029 also, so that they could kind of hide them from the public out there, because most of the bond debt is paid in 28, so our taxes were going to drop, so they deferred it out there. So subsequently, we're paying $8 million of interest on that bond. The Fed rate in 21 was 0. The interest rates were low, but they deferred it all the way out there. So that we have about $8 million a year for 5 years that we'll be paying starting in 2029 for those 2 new buildings up there. I do think
$8 million per year.
Yeah, for 5 years, yeah, almost just shy of $8 million per year for
Now,
5 years.
How much money was spent in demolishing the old Central?
Um,
That is another issue, because we didn't sell the property. That is
Right.
another issue that people never take into consideration
Well,
as part of the expenses.
Yeah, right. You're absolutely right. And yeah, they actually did report the demolition cost, which was, I think, if I remember, memory serves me right, about 140, something like that. Can't remember now. 1.4, I think, 1.4 million or something. But
my goodness.
the asbestos abatement was not included in that, in their reporting, and that brought it up to almost 3 million.
Oh, my
with
goodness.
asbestos abatement. I've got those 2 contracts on asbestos abatement, and so that was never reported out in the mainstream media, that they were up there for months with asbestos abatement. It was 1.6 million for the primary contractor, and then there was a $25,000 rider for testing for air quality around there, and then there was $1,000 a day, just shy of $1,000 a day to test every day up there while it went on, and they were up there for a long time. I never did get the full amount on that, but the whole cost was in the neighborhood of 3 million to take it down, with the asbestos abatement included. And again, that was never reported around. Yeah.
Did they take down the STC building with the greenhouse and all of that? Did they, and the restaurant, did they take all of that
Oh,
down?
and that's another thing that just, to me, is so heartbreaking. I mean, this goes on and on and on and on, and I've been involved in it, and I've been involved in this whole thing again, where they're up there now, that, they made a deal with the developer on that property up there, now. And STC now, it was only 16 years old when it was shut down.
And we hadn't even paid off $90,000?
No, we had to
90.
spend 2.3 million is what we paid while it sat there empty. 2.3 million we paid. We got it paid off in 2015, about 4 years after it was shut down. But now it's been sitting empty for 13 years. It's still only 29 years old. 52,000 square foot building. It's still sitting there empty. And this developer, do have it on there that they may demolish it. They're not sure what they're going to do, but it is one of the options is to just tear it down. It's still only 29 years old. I mean, to me, the waste up there on that property alone is just, it's heartbreaking, really. I mean, they put brand new tennis courts, new running track, all that work. All that stuff
yeah.
on the playgrounds up there in the stadium and everything, millions they spent just a decade before they shut it down. Then they shut down the high school. It was only 40 years old. It had a replacement value of 56 to 60 million, and they shut it down, leave it sit there for 10 years. We lost a whole bunch of money on maintenance and heating and everything for 10 years. And then we spent, like I said, nearly $3 million to tear it down. It was still only 51 years old by the time we finally tore it down. 228,000 square foot building. I tell people it's like adding Congdon onto the old Central downtown. You know how big that is downtown. It's like adding Congdon onto that. That's how big that school was up there. Tore it all down, threw it in a landfill. And then, and now we've got STC sitting there, and it may even get demolished. It's still only 29 years old, and like you said, it cost $13 million to build it. It was a 52,000 square foot beloved building, great educational facility. It's been sitting there for 13 years. I mean, it's so disgusting the way our money has been wasted here. To me, it's not sustainable to spend our money this way. We've just simply got to get better use of our tax dollars. And I've been involved in that issue again with the city council. I just don't think the options they have on the table are very good to handle the traffic up there or anything. I don't know if you know that the person that's pushing that, I don't want to get too far down the track on this, but this is kind of important to know, that the person one of the principals for these developers up here on the central property was the account executive for Johnson Controls. He's back. Jeff Schultz, he's back. He was the one pushing so much of the spin on the red plan. Now he's back with this new. He's coming in to kind of profit off the waste up there, and making God knows how much money again on this big development that they're putting up there. He's the one pushing it. He's got a new company started up, and he's back representing the developers here, and it's the same guy, and he's spinning like he did before, and they're all following him around like he's the Pied Piper again. So I do think, again, I think it's related to this, and I do think it's related to all the problems that we've had, and I think that and I've said it repeatedly as a candidate, that you need, what you really need in terms of diversity is intellectual diversity, and you need that in government so that you have a good discussion on the front end and you vet things properly. You vet ideas properly before they're implemented as decisions, and I think that's been a problem throughout this process. The problem with one-party rule, I pointed out repeatedly as a candidate that, group thought just doesn't work. It doesn't work very well. And there's just too many special interests that they bow down to. Let's face it. These special interests pay for their campaigns, and now it's payback time. They come in there and they twist arms, and it's payback time. And I just don't. I think there's a flaw in the way the whole town is governed. But obviously in the school board room, it's been the worst example of it. And we've been taken to the cleaners just on that campus alone. Look at the waste. And we were supposed to get we could have sold it for $14.2 million. We ended up getting $7.8 million. And they didn't even use the money for tax relief as they promised. They ended up keeping it in the budget, and they broke that promise to the public. It's just, to me, it's just been unacceptable how badly the public has been taken for a ride on all of this.
Well, I have a little thought that always goes on in my mind. Truth is stranger than fiction. We don't live in a society that talks truth anymore. They spin so many things, and that is called lying. And people are so used to it, they don't even recognize it. But when somebody that is spinning a lie gets elected to the board, you got to wonder, okay, I think you just said it, how they got elected. They want to carry the water buckets of those people. And the public is unaware of what's going on because we have the controlled media that doesn't tell the truth. And that includes your other types of media around here, which is your TV stations and most of the radio. So how will people find out about the truth if there are no publications that print it, and radio stations that don't talk it, TV stations that don't present it? It's blind leading the blind. And when you go out there and vote, you need to think about this second referendum failed last fall. So why did it fail? The question is, how many people knew what they were doing when they went out and voted and passed that first one and didn't pass this one? Well, it was for technology. It was kind of listed as technology. Suppose they thought maybe they don't need more technology because we just put it all in. They don't know that the technology is obsolete not too long after they get it installed. I took a class at Ordine Middle School that never had a classroom in it, and I got that from the janitor. I took a journalism class there. There had never been a class in there. And if you go around the school, I had never been in the high school, there's a lot of paper on a lot of windows. They don't even have classes in some of those rooms. And that's why your classes are crowded, because you don't have the teachers to provide that. So I do know from a woman who's taken her kids out of the public school system, put them in an alternative education. They are going up one more year at a time, and they took out 100 kids from the 9th grade, the year her child started.
Yep.
So people are finding alternatives, but we're still paying for on our taxes, and we're forced to pay it.
Yeah.
So I hope this information, I hope people will get this information. We need to disperse it as much as possible, but let's do a little bit. You had 4 major points there, so do you want to fill in a little bit more on each one?
Yeah, and I also just want to, and I want to fill in just on what you said here. I think it's a good point. I mean, you know, what are the priorities? I mean, a lot of people have asked me that too. You know, it's such a, it seems to be almost a bottomless money pit on this technology. You've got to have cybersecurity insurance, for example, now, and you can't even get insurance unless everything is completely updated all the time. So they've got you in so many ways on this thing, and people have asked me and raised the concerns about the very thing you're talking about, and that is, you know, how do we get class sizes down? You know, is it really, you know, should we put another 52.9 million into technology, or should we be putting it into teachers and getting those class sizes down? We've spent so much money, and we're not that competitive in the educational marketplace, and we're nowhere near what they projected the enrollment was going to be, well over 1,000 students below what they projected from the Red Plan. You know, how do you spend that money best? And then I think it's a fair question. You know, just how much is the technology worth? I'm not saying it's not worth anything. It's you know, it's obviously the way the world is run now, and you just have to be up to speed on it. But you know, I know some people too. I know a woman, for example. She and her friend went out, and they had 5 kids between them, and they were looking at the public schools, and her father was a public school teacher, so she wanted to send her kids to public schools. And she said, you know, there were 2 things: the bus ride from the Red Plan. You know, they had to take this long bus ride. She said the other thing was just the class sizes; they were just too big. And so they had 5 kids, and they picked another option. And so it is a really important thing in the marketplace as well. There's a market part of this, and that's the other thing that, to me, has always been missed in this whole discussion, is that it is an educational marketplace. You've got to make moves almost like a business, that you have to be aware of the market, you know, and for all the money we've spent, we've done very little to position ourselves in the market. You know, it's also, obviously, you know, having small classes is better for education. It's better for the teachers, doesn't burn them out. But it also just is a marketplace driver as well. It's a big thing in people's minds, you know, the class sizes when they go and look at where they're going to send their kids. So, you know, people have asked me, you know, is this the best way we can use our money? Is just continually dump all this money in the technology? Again, we dumped a lot into the Red Plan, and within 4 years after it was over, they were already calling them obsolete and wanting to throw them in dumpsters. And then, you know, we threw a lot in during the pandemic. We're going to throw another 50+ million if they even keep up on this plan, which is questionable, I think, in and of itself. But at the same time, where's all this money going to come from? I mean, there's a larger question in play here for me. It's just the sustainability of the whole thing. You know, I mean, you look at, and when I got involved with this, you know, what drew me in, first of all, you know, I couldn't believe I was not going to have a vote on it. Biggest consolidation in the history of the state, and that really upset me. And then I didn't believe so much of it. I thought it would worsen the east-west divide, and that's what it did. I didn't believe the financing. I thought the idea of selling all this excess property was nonsense. I mean, they dumped 10 buildings, 8 of them school buildings, and 200 acres on the market at the same time. In a little town like this, they eliminated their primary customer, other educational organizations, and claimed they were going to sell them all quickly and at top dollar. It made no business sense. It made no business sense. I mean, where was the market for them? So, there were so many flaws in the whole thing. I didn't believe it was going to be half paid for through the financing. I never believed it. But I also, when I got in there, I just started looking at the whole system and how it's run, and then locally, and then I looked at the state, and I'm more questioning, how this thing is working, because you take the state, $2.26 billion they put into public education last year. And a third of the districts are broke already. Within a couple more years, I believe they'll all be broke. You take the Anoka-Hennepin district, which is the largest in the state, 38,000 kids. I mean, this was an NPR story, not some right-wing story. This was on NPR's website. They spent all of their money. I mean, 38,000, the per pupil formula went up by $275 a kid, so added up, 38,000 kids, $10.5 million. They spent it all on their contracts. All of it, it's gone. They gave a 5% raise and a bonus and a bunch of other stuff, and so I do wonder about. It almost seems like it's an endless, bottomless pit. I've asked the question repeatedly. Where is the bottom line on this? Do you just have to give them a blank check? And it's not sustainable in my opinion. To me, there should be some reforms. The other side. And I used to be a hardcore DFLer, but I questioned more and more just throwing more money at the problem and not reforming anything. I thought it was time for an audit of the MDE. I mean, Ryan Wilson, one of the candidates for the state auditor's position, went around and said that, and he wanted to spot audit school districts again. I thought it was time to do that. Instead, they expanded the MDE by 48 positions. So I do think that, as I said during the last campaign, to some degree, it's like, enabling an alcoholic, just to continue throwing money in without some kind of basic reforms. And I'm not sure, like the whole country, which I think is, I look at the national debt and where it's going by mid-century, I think, the whole thing seems to be reeling out of control. And my point has always been, if you're going to get any control, it starts in your backyard. And from the beginning, just the way they've blown money. You look at a levy, again, that's gone up by will go up here if they get this by over sixfold in 2 decades. And how much have we moved the needle on education? And I do question the viability of it. I truly do. And I think that's a larger question that I think is worth having.
And that's my issue. We have not moved the needle of education forward. It is backwards. When you have kids that come out of school, 3rd or 5th grade education, there is something wrong with the entire system. There's enough people there's a small amount of people that are pulling their children out. However, there's not enough people shouting from the rooftops, get your house in order.
Yeah.
We're not hearing from the populace that we need to hear from. So,
and I'm not saying it's all bad. I mean, and there's that there's not dedicated teachers, and that they don't love education, and that they're not dedicated to it. And I'm not putting down teachers or anything like that. I know there's a lot. I've seen them myself. I've had a lot of interpersonal contact with teachers, et cetera, and man, they care a lot. They really do, and they work hard. It's a hard job. I'd hate to be a teacher right now. Can you imagine what it's like?
No.
I mean,
no.
They barely have any control. When I was out as a candidate last time, I ran into some teachers. I ran into a para. She said it's just crazy in there. She said some of the schools she was in, she was just describing some things to me that once upon a time just would not have been allowed to happen.
No.
Just would not have been allowed to happen, and they barely can control the kids at times in those schools, and it's just a horrible situation where you're trying to teach in that environment. So I have a lot of empathy for them, but can we fix it by, it doesn't, we've thrown a lot of money at it, we haven't fixed it, it doesn't seem like we're getting anywhere, it only seems like it's getting worse that way. So I do question whether or not, I do believe that the question should be on the table, and we should have a discussion about it. Let me put it that way. It's about how we spend this money. I've tried to have that debate for some time. We're not made of money. It doesn't grow on government trees, so we only have so many dollars to go so far. And again, whether or not, it turns out to be the right decision to throw another $52.9 million into technology, even if they deliver on that promise, is a discussion that the public should really have at some point. Because we've got to get good value out of our dollars. We don't have unlimited number of dollars. We just don't, and we can't continue to do it. So I do think that, I would like to see a better discussion, and there wasn't really any discussion at all in the boardroom about it. Just, we need to do this in a lecture about why the public had to give this money again. We just have to, it's the right thing to do, Henry Banks said. And during my competitor in the last election, he told everyone they were obligated to pay. And, and I don't believe they're obligated to pay. If they want to pay, it's up to them. But I think that has to be earned. I don't think it's an obligation. I think that the district has to earn the trust of the public if they want them to pay. And it's the public's right to make that decision whether or not they trust that organization to deliver on those dollars. And we should have a real debate, and the public should have a right to have a say about whether or not they think their money has been prioritized correctly, and whether or not they're going to get where they really want to go with education by spending $52.9 million this way. And I think that discussion should have been had in the boardroom, and that's my argument for allowing other voices in the government in Duluth and having a broader debate on these investments right on the front end. I think there should be a more thorough debate in government. And thank you for having, this forum anyway, so that, some other viewpoints can be aired. It's really important, I think.
Well, and the only way that we're going to get this heard is it'll be up on my YouTube channel, Just the Facts, but it'll be on cable channel as well. We have to get the word out to other people that they should tune into this and understand what they don't know anything about. And
Absolutely.
they're going to go to the polls. They're going to vote because it's for the children. But like I said already, the education levels are nowhere near what they used to be. And there is chaos in the classroom. I've talked to people whose family members are there doing their best, but there's so much that's going on the public is not even aware of, that it needs to be addressed before you go to the poll and say, oh, sure, give them more money, because it's going to come back to bite you in the end. Your taxes are going to increase, and you're going to wonder what on earth is going on.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I do think that also that the public just needs to, I think that, education is incredibly important. It is the future. When they play the kid card, I can't disagree with it in that sense. It truly is, and I think it's the most important investment. But on the other hand, we do also have to make sure that, at the end of the day, we're really helping the kids. And my concern about the whole country is, are we really helping the kids if we're spending beyond what we can afford, and what are we leaving them that way, And I always point out that when, Dixon came to town and he kept playing the kid card, that someone that was a kid that was 10 years old was going to be in their 40s by the time we got the bill paid off, from what he did. And we really helping that kid, and it was just a big mess the entire time, big the whole district turned into a mess from it, did we really help those kids, that were trying to get educated in that big mess? I do think that you have, it's easy to play the kid card, but are you really helping the kids if you're if you're making a reckless investment, or if you're causing more damage, or you're going to leave a big bill for them to pay off in the future? Is that really helping the kids? What's really helping the kids? And I do think there's been some stellar accomplishments in ISD 709, but I certainly hear a lot of the other. And I do hear a lot from the people when they're off the record that work in the buildings about what they're dealing with in those buildings, and it is at times not very conducive to education. And do you just keep throwing more and more and more money at that problem, and more counselors or whatever, or what is the best approach to try to get a better atmosphere in those schools, and also where people want to send their kids in there, because that's another reason why people are, picking other options. My late wife was a teacher at Marshall, and, they were paying a lot of money to go there. And they went there because, it was a really small class size and not more than 20 kids in her class. And it was, it was just, the place was well ordered, and nobody's going to get lost in that school. And they knew they were going to get a really good education, and every kid was going to get really good attention. It's those things that people really care about, not big swimming pools and all this. I always thought they were way off on the deep end in terms of the value of the
in
facility.
more ways than one.
Oh, yeah, no pun intended, but yeah. But yeah, I just believe that you have to question the priorities about how you spend those limited dollars, and just what will help the kids, And I do think that we've made some gross errors, and I just don't see a change in attitude about it. I just don't. In the boardroom, just give us more. Believe us now. We're going to do this now, and we know what's best. And I think it's good. There's a good reason to question the wisdom of how we've been led. I think anybody, fair-minded person, can see that things have gone a bit awry from their promises in the past, and there's good reason to question, whether or not their promises are going to come true this time. Certainly, I have some big questions about it.
Well, this woman that took her two children out of the public system, and now in this private school, I saw her father. We had elections up in Normanna Township where I live, and the grandfather was there, and he couldn't say enough about the quality and the atmosphere of this new school. He was just raving about what his grandchildren were now experiencing. And I have heard this term several times. Chaos in the classroom is not conducive to the safety of the children or their education. And my granddaughter experienced this down in Coon Rapids. She had to go home and finish off her 17th year because it was so distracting. When I went to school, you were quiet. When the teacher spoke, you listened. You were respectful to the teachers. And if they sent a note home with you to your parents, you got in trouble twice.
Yep.
Nowadays, it's chaos in the classroom. This is what you're paying for, to put these children who are at risk. I mean, you didn't see fights. You didn't see disrespectfulness without having a consequence to it. Today, it is chaotic in the classrooms. And all we do is dump more money into things. We just keep going to the taxpayer, and now the taxpayer doesn't have any right to say no, because now the state has passed the law that the school district has the right to pass these referendums. Well, do you think if they've got the right to pass these referendums, they care one whit about us as taxpayers or parents? No. They have control. They have ultimate control, and ultimate control corrupts ultimately. So I appreciate all that you're trying to do, Loren. I'm sure it's exasperating at times because you're like crying in the wind.
And, you know, I will say.
But I think we have to keep trying to do something because the children are at stake.
Absolutely. And I do want to say, you know, and I appreciate you bringing up the vote part one more time, because that's obviously been very, very important to me from the beginning. And it's the heart of democracy, you know, and it always blows me away that my former political party, and I'm not aligned with either political party, to be clear on that. Now I just kind of put a pox on both parties anymore. But you know, that they're the ones that talk about the sanctity of the vote, and they're the ones that are always doing this, you know. And we've lost the vote so many times here in our school district. They obviously for the red plan, and then for the extension for the red plan, those two buildings up there, again, they took the vote away for that. And then over the last 10 years, they've used two taxing authorities to move over $6 million that was once public approved operational levy money. Now it's board approved. You know, so they've been moving that way more and more. And I do think that that is the leverage that we have as citizens, that, you know, to have some say. You know, if you take away our ability to vote on the money, then what leverage do we have? I mean, and especially when you've got, you know, a board that, you know, they're all in bed with the vested interests right now. My opponent, I can show you a circular here, sent out on his behalf by the teachers union while I ran against him, paid for by the teachers union. You know, you've got sort of, you know, this is the fox guarding the hen house to some degree, you know. They're all seven of them are, you know, related and indebted to the unions in some way or manner. So I do think that the public, because of the political environment in the town, and the fact that increasingly we don't have a vote, we increasingly have no say, period. I mean, and it is an issue for me that we are essentially cut out of the whole thing because they don't even give us a vote anymore. And so I'm appealing to people that they have a vote. This time, they have a vote in May. And it may be the last time they have a vote for 20 years on $100 million. They're counting on no one showing up. That's why they're making us pay $100,000 for this election. Hoping that, you know, that no one will show up. They've lost twice in two November elections over the last 5 years. They've tried to get it twice, technology referendum. In a November election, they've lost twice, so they think it's not in their favor to have a lot of people show up and vote. So they're doing this, hoping everyone will look down the road at November and not get to the polls in May. And you know, whether you decide to vote for it or not, I would like to see a big turnout at the polls and hear what the public have to say, but I think they're counting on the people just being asleep at the switch, you know, that nobody's going to think that it's important or even understand what the importance of it is, what's at stake, and everyone's going to stay home. That's what they're counting on, and then they'll just load up the polls with their people and get what they want. And to me, it's a manipulation of the system, purposely trying to exploit the ignorance of the public, frankly. I think that the public shouldn't allow that to happen. They should take this opportunity. They haven't gotten many votes. They've got one in May. You know, and everybody, if I were, I can't imagine anybody not showing up and voting for this and actually taking advantage of the one time you're going to have a vote. I would beg people to do that. You know, whether if they want to vote for it, all the more power to them. That's their right to do what they want with their money. But please, everybody, show up. I mean, how much effort does it take? They just go and vote. And if you don't, you deserve what you get. You know, the public is responsible in a way because they don't engage enough. If they don't vote on this and they get hit with $100 million over the next 20 years, it's on them.
The other thing you have to think about is there's early voting starting on the 24th.
29th.
29th,
Yep.
Thank you. 29th of March.
Yep.
That is not but a few days away.
Yep.
So you can't use the excuse that you're going to be out of town in May, you know, maybe you're on vacation or whatever, or maybe you're already out of town and you're coming back. You know, a lot of people go south in the wintertime.
Right.
So you can get an absentee ballot and vote absentee.
Oh, it's so easy.
As long as
Yeah.
you own property, in the 709 school district, and this just doesn't mean the city of Duluth proper. I know when I was running first district, people didn't know in the townships that they could vote on 709 school district issues. They had no clue.
Yeah.
And I said, where do you send your children? Duluth School District. They said, there's your answer. So even the surrounding townships need to get their people out to the polls.
Absolutely.
And
And a lot of people just, just don't seem to be awake to it, and that's what they're counting on, that people will be asleep. And I just don't think that's a good way to operate, but that's what they're doing, and the public should wake up and get to the polls, vote how you want, but please, participate in democracy, at least to that extent. It's so easy. Like you said, you can vote early. You got like 6 weeks to vote, before the election, and how much effort is there to get there on election day? There's polls all over the place. It just amazes me. And then people complain and complain about their government, and so many don't do that simple thing to get to the polls. I don't understand it. People die all over the world for the vote. Out there right now, there's people fighting for democracy, for a right to have a say in their government, to vote. And then we take it for granted, and we don't even do it. It's so hard to get people to the polls even. Again, to some degree, you get the government you deserve if you don't do it, and I think I've always said the public is, to some degree, guilty of this for not trying harder themselves to get engaged and at least do that basic thing of voting, just that basic, exercise that basic right as a free citizen in a democracy. Vote. November, May 14th. I almost said November, so used to November.
May 14th,
May
yeah.
14th, yep.
Well, the other thing here that you got to take into consideration, folks, they are spending $100,000 of your tax money for a election in May. All the years I was an election judge, which started when my son was 1 year old, he's now 56. All of a sudden we have a election for the school district in May. You think they're trying to hide this from you? Well, yes, I will say affirmative, they are trying to hide this from you. So please, like Loren has said, like he's explained, the reason why you need to vote, the ultimate income will be affecting you financially.
And
Thanks for tuning in.
It affects your kids as well.
Yes.
It really does.
Thanks for coming in, Loren.
Thank you for your time.